It was a crisp autumn evening when I first laid eyes on him. The kind of evening where the air feels electric, charged with possibilities. My name is Eliza, 24, fresh out of graduate school with a degree in literature and absolutely no idea what to do with it. I had moved to the city just 3 weeks prior, my apartment still cluttered with half-unpacked boxes and mismatched furniture. The party wasn't my scene. I'd been dragged there by my new roommate, Jen, who insisted I needed to meet people. People, as it turned out, meant a crowded apartment filled with strangers clutching red cups and shouting over music that was just a touch too loud. That's when I saw him. Alexander, though everyone called him Alex, 27, with the kind of confidence that came from knowing exactly who you were and not apologizing for it. He stood against the wall, observing the room with an amused half-smile, as if he was in on a joke no one else understood. He wasn't conventionally handsome, not in the way romance novels describe leading men. His nose had clearly been broken once, maybe twice, and his dark hair fell across his forehead in a way that suggested he'd forgotten to get it cut rather than styled it that way. But there was something magnetic about him, something in the way he held himself that drew my gaze across the crowded room. Our eyes met for just a moment, a brief connection that sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. I looked away first, pretending to be fascinated by the contents of my drink. When I dared to look up again, he was gone, swallowed by the crowd. I told myself I wasn't disappointed. After all, what was one stranger at a party I hadn't even wanted to attend? Little did I know that this brief encounter would be the first thread in a tapestry that would eventually envelop my entire life. Let me take you back to that night, because understanding how we began is crucial to comprehending what followed. The apartment belonged to someone in Jen's office. I never did catch their name. It was one of those city apartments with exposed brick walls and large windows that probably cost more per month than my entire college tuition. The living room had been transformed into an impromptu dance floor, while the kitchen served as both bar and refuge for those seeking conversation without having to shout. I had retreated to the kitchen after losing Jen to a group of her coworkers. Standing awkwardly by the refrigerator, I contemplated how long I needed to stay before I could politely leave. That's when he appeared beside me, reaching past me for a bottle of water. "Not drinking?" I asked, immediately regretting the question. What a painfully obvious observation. But Alex just smiled, that same amused half-smile I'd noticed earlier. "Designated driver," he explained, his voice deeper than I'd expected. "Someone has to make sure these idiots get home safely." He gestured vaguely toward a group of guys by the living room entrance. "I'm Alex, by the way." "Eliza," I replied, suddenly very aware of how close we were standing in the cramped kitchen. I could smell his cologne, something woodsy and subtle that seemed to fit him perfectly. "So, Eliza," he said, leaning against the counter, "how do you know our gracious host?" I admitted I didn't, explaining my roommate's situation and recent move. He listened attentively, asking questions that showed genuine interest rather than polite small talk. Our conversation flowed easily, jumping from topic to topic. He told me he worked in architectural restoration, preserving historical buildings around the city. I shared my love for literature and my uncertainty about my career path. Before I knew it, an hour had passed, and the kitchen had emptied and filled several times over while we remained in our little bubble. It wasn't until someone bumped into me, pushing me slightly forward, that I realized how close we'd gotten. Our arms brushed, a momentary contact that shouldn't have felt significant, but somehow did. I felt a warmth spread across my cheeks and took a step back, needing to create some distance. Alex noticed, of course he did, and that smile appeared again, a little wider this time. "Sorry about that," I mumbled, though it wasn't my fault. "I'm not," he replied simply, holding my gaze with an intensity that made my breath catch. The moment was interrupted by one of his friends calling his name. Alex sighed, clearly reluctant to end our conversation. "I should probably check on them," he said, "but I'd like to continue this. Maybe somewhere quieter." Before I could respond, he pulled out his phone, asking for my number. I gave it to him, trying to appear casual even as my heart raced. He sent me a text right there, just his name with a simple "hi." So I would have his number too. Then, with a promise to be right back, he disappeared into the crowd again. I stood there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. Was this how adults met in the real world? It seemed too simple, too easy. There had to be a catch. I decided to find Jen, suddenly eager to share this unexpected development with someone who might help me make sense of it. The living room was even more crowded now, the music louder. I squeezed past dancing bodies, scanning faces for my roommate. That's when I felt it, a hand closing around my wrist, stopping me mid-step. I turned, expecting Jen, but instead found myself looking up at Alex. Without a word, he guided my hand upward, placing my palm against his throat. I could feel his pulse beneath my fingers, steady and strong. Time seemed to slow as we stood there, my hand on his throat, his fingers still loosely circling my wrist. It was an intimate gesture, one that spoke of trust and vulnerability. Here was this man I had just met, allowing me to touch him in a place that could so easily be harmed. And yet, there was also something possessive in the way he had caught my wrist, something that hinted at a desire to control. His eyes never left mine as he stood there, watching my reaction. I couldn't have looked away if I tried. There was a question in his gaze, though I wasn't entirely sure what he was asking. Permission? Understanding? Reciprocation? Whatever it was, I found myself wanting to answer yes. Let me explain why this moment mattered so much. In that crowded room, with music pulsing around us and strangers pushing past, we had created a space that belonged only to us. A bubble of intimacy that defied the chaos. His gesture, placing my hand on his throat, was both an offering and a challenge. He was showing me that he trusted me, even as he maintained control of the situation. It was a perfect encapsulation of what our relationship would become, a delicate balance of power, vulnerability, and trust. I could feel my pulse quickening, a stark contrast to the steady rhythm beneath my fingertips. My mind raced with conflicting thoughts. This was too fast, too intense for someone I had just met. And yet, there was something undeniably right about it, as if we were acting out a scene that had been written long before we met. "What are you doing?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely audible over the music. "Testing a theory," he replied, his throat vibrating against my palm as he spoke. "I wanted to see if you'd pull away. And if I did, then I'd know you weren't ready for what I have to offer." There was an honesty in his words that caught me off guard. No games, no pretense, just a straightforward acknowledgement of his intentions. It was refreshing and terrifying in equal measure. I didn't pull away. Instead, I let my fingers press slightly harder against his skin, feeling his pulse jump in response. A small smile played at the corners of my mouth, mirroring his earlier expression. Two could play at this game of vulnerability and control. Our standoff continued, neither of us willing to be the first to break this strange, charged moment. His eyes held mine, dark and unreadable. What was he thinking? Was he as affected by this as I was? Or was this just an amusing diversion for him? I searched his face for clues, noting the slight tension in his jaw, the way his breathing had deepened almost imperceptibly. My mind wandered to past relationships, none of which had started with such intensity. There had been David in college, sweet and safe, whose kisses had never made my heart race like this simple touch was doing. Then Michael after graduation, whose passion had burned bright, but quickly faded when real life intruded. Neither had made me feel this combination of excitement and trepidation, this sense that I was standing on the edge of something monumental. The realization hit me with surprising clarity. I was attracted to Alex in a way that went beyond physical appreciation. There was something about his confidence, his directness, that called to something deep within me. A part of me I hadn't fully acknowledged before, a desire for intensity, for connection that went beyond the superficial niceties of dating. Just as I was about to speak, to break the silence that had stretched between us, a voice cut through our bubble. "There you are." Jen appeared beside us, slightly tipsy and completely oblivious to what she had interrupted. "I've been looking everywhere for you." Alex released my wrist slowly, his fingers trailing along my skin as he let go. The loss of contact felt significant, as if a circuit had been broken. I reluctantly pulled my hand away from his throat, already missing the warmth of his skin. "Jen, this is Alex," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Alex, my roommate Jen." They exchanged pleasantries, but I could see Alex's attention wasn't fully engaged. His eyes kept drifting back to me, carrying the weight of our unfinished moment. Jen, on the other hand, was completely unaware of the tension, chatting animatedly about the party and the people she'd met. "We should probably head out soon," she said eventually. "I have that early meeting tomorrow, remember?" I nodded, though I had completely forgotten about her meeting. The thought of leaving now, of ending whatever had just begun with Alex, filled me with a strange sense of loss. But before I could figure out how to extend our time together, Alex spoke up. "I should check on my friends anyway," he said, his casual tone belying the intensity of his gaze. "But I'll text you, Eliza. Maybe we can continue our conversation over coffee sometime." "I'd like that," I replied, hoping my voice didn't betray how much I meant those words. With a final look that seemed to carry 1,000 unspoken promises, he disappeared into the crowd once more. Jen immediately turned to me, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Okay, what was that?" The tension between you two was thick enough to cut with a knife. I shrugged, not ready to share the details of our encounter. How could I explain what had happened when I barely understood it myself? "We were just talking," I said, knowing how inadequate those words were. Jen clearly didn't believe me, but was too good a friend to push. As we gathered our things and headed for the door, I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. A text from Alex. "You didn't pull away. I'll remember that." The days that followed were a strange mix of normalcy and anticipation. I went about my routine, job hunting, unpacking my remaining boxes, exploring my new neighborhood, all while carrying the memory of that night like a secret talisman. Alex and I texted regularly, conversations that ranged from mundane daily observations to deeper discussions about our pasts, our dreams, our fears. Each message revealed another layer of him, making the anticipation of seeing him again both sweeter and more nerve-wracking. We finally arranged to meet for coffee the following Saturday at a small cafe near the park. I arrived early, choosing a table by the window where I could watch for his approach. My stomach fluttered with nerves, which I found almost amusing. How long had it been since a simple coffee date had made me feel this way? I saw him before he saw me, walking down the street with that same confident stride I'd noticed at the party. He was dressed casually in jeans and a dark blue sweater that made his eyes seem even more intense when he finally spotted me through the window. The smile that spread across his face sent a wave of warmth through me. This wasn't just attraction. This was something more, something with potential. Our coffee date stretched into lunch, and then a walk through the park as neither of us seemed willing to end our time together. We talked about everything and nothing, the conversation flowing as easily as it had that first night. But there was an undercurrent now, a tension that had been established by that moment with my hand on his throat. It colored every look, every accidental brush of our hands as we walked. "You know," he said as we paused by a small pond, watching ducks glide across the surface, "I don't usually do what I did at the party." I glanced at him, curious. "Which part? The wrist grabbing or the throat offering?" He laughed, a genuine sound that made me smile in response. "Both, actually. I'm still not entirely sure what came over me. There was just something about you." He trailed off, looking slightly embarrassed for the first time since I'd met him. "Something about me that made you want to test me?" I prompted, remembering his words from that night. "Something about you that made me want to know if you felt it too," he corrected. That connection. It's not common, finding someone who understands the language you're speaking without having to explain it. I knew exactly what he meant. From the moment our eyes had met across that crowded room, there had been a recognition, as if some part of me had been waiting for him without even knowing it. "I felt it," I admitted softly. "I still do." His hand found mine then, fingers intertwining with a certainty that belied the newness of our relationship. We continued walking, talking about lighter topics, but that acknowledgement hung between us, a promise of something deeper to come. The weeks that followed saw us growing closer, spending more and more time together. Alex introduced me to his friends, the same ones he'd been designated driver for at the party. I introduced him to Jen, who gave her enthusiastic approval after grilling him over dinner at our apartment. We explored the city together, Alex showing me hidden architectural gems that tourists never saw, me dragging him to obscure bookstores and poetry readings. But we hadn't revisited that intensity from the party. Our physical relationship had progressed naturally, holding hands, kisses that grew increasingly passionate, nights spent on his couch talking until dawn. But that edge, that moment of power and vulnerability, remained unique. Sometimes I would catch him looking at my wrist, or feel his gaze linger on my throat, and know he was thinking about it too. I found myself wondering about it more and more. What had it meant to him? Was it just a momentary impulse, Or did it represent something he needed from a relationship? And perhaps more importantly, what had my response revealed about me? The fact that I hadn't pulled away, that I had accepted and even reciprocated his gesture. What did that say about what I wanted? These questions led me to conversations with friends about relationships and power dynamics. Jen, always direct, asked me point blank one evening, "Are you into that kind of thing? The dominant stuff?" I hadn't known how to answer. My past relationships had been relatively conventional, but they had also left me feeling like something was missing. "I don't know," I told her honestly. "I've never explored it. But with Alex, there's something there. Something that feels right." "Then maybe you should talk to him about it," she suggested. Communication is key in any relationship, but especially when you're navigating uncharted territory. She was right, of course, but finding the right moment, the right words, proved challenging. Our relationship was still new, still finding its footing. What if bringing it up changed things between us? What if he had moved past that moment and would be uncomfortable revisiting it? The opportunity finally presented itself about 2 months after we'd met. We were at his apartment, cooking dinner together, or rather, he was cooking while I sat on the counter, sipping wine and watching him work. There was something mesmerizing about the way he moved in the kitchen, confident and precise. "You're staring," he noted, a smile in his voice as he stirred the sauce. "Just appreciating the view," I replied, taking another sip of my wine. The alcohol had loosened my tongue just enough to add, "You have very nice hands." He glanced up, catching the weight behind my words. "Do I?" I nodded, setting my glass down. "I've been thinking about your hands a lot, actually. Specifically, how one of them felt around my wrist that night at the party." The wooden spoon paused mid-stir. Alex's expression grew serious, focused. He turned the heat down on the stove before moving to stand in front of me, positioning himself between my knees as I sat on the counter. "What about it?" he asked, his voice low. "I've been wondering if it was a one-time thing, or if it meant something more to you." The words came out in a rush, my courage threatening to desert me. "Because it meant something to me." His hands came to rest on either side of me, not touching but effectively caging me in. "What did it mean to you, Eliza?" The way he said my name sent a shiver through me. "It meant that you saw something in me that others haven't," I admitted. "A desire for intensity, for connection that goes beyond the surface." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to maintain eye contact, for a balance of control and surrender that I've never found before. Alex was silent for a long moment, studying my face with an intensity that made my heart race. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached for my hand. Just as he had that night, he guided it to his throat, pressing my palm against his skin. "Like this?" he asked softly. I nodded, unable to speak as I felt his pulse quicken beneath my touch. With my other hand, I reached for his wrist, bringing it up to my own throat in a mirror of his gesture. His fingers spread gently across my skin, a touch that was both possessive and reverent. "I've wanted to do this again since that night," he confessed. "But I was afraid I'd scared you off, that I'd moved too fast, been too intense." "You didn't scare me," I assured him. "You woke something up in me, something I didn't know was there, or maybe something I'd been ignoring." His thumb traced a gentle path along my jawline. "This isn't just about physical control for me, Eliza. It's about trust, about finding someone who understands that vulnerability and strength aren't opposites. They're two sides of the same coin." I understood then, with perfect clarity, what had drawn me to him from the beginning. It wasn't just his confidence or his charm, though those certainly played a part. It was his ability to see me, truly see me, and recognize parts of myself I had yet to fully acknowledge. "I want to explore this with you," I said, my voice stronger now. "Whatever this is between us, I want to understand it better." The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise, slow and warm and full of promise. "We'll take it slow," he assured me. "Figure it out together. There's no rush." But even as he said it, his hand tightened slightly around my throat, not enough to restrict my breathing, just enough to remind me of his presence, his control. My pulse jumped in response, a physical acknowledgement of the effect he had on me. Dinner was forgotten that night as we embarked on a different kind of exploration. Words gave way to touch, to the silent communication of bodies learning each other's boundaries and desires. It wasn't just physical, though that aspect was undeniably powerful. It was emotional, a laying bare of vulnerabilities and needs that I had never shared with anyone before. In the weeks and months that followed, Alex and I continued to explore this dynamic between us. We talked openly about our boundaries, our desires, our fears. We learned that what we shared wasn't about one person having power over the other. It was about the exchange of power, the gift of trust given and received with equal reverence. There were challenges, of course, moments of misunderstanding, times when one of us pushed too far or not far enough. The outside world didn't always understand what we shared. I remember Jen's concerned face when she noticed the faint marks on my wrists one morning, how I had to explain that they were given and received with love and consent, not fear or coercion. "I just want to make sure you're happy," she had said, her worry evident. "That this is really what you want." "It is," I assured her. "He sees me, Jen. All of me. The parts I've always hidden, the desires I've never acknowledged. And he doesn't just accept them, he celebrates them." Gradually, those close to us came to understand that what Alex and I shared was healthy, even if it didn't fit conventional definitions of romance. Our relationship wasn't defined by the power dynamics we explored in private. It was built on a foundation of mutual respect, open communication, and genuine affection. A year after that fateful party, Alex and I moved in together. His apartment was larger than mine, with high ceilings and windows that let in the morning light. We created a home that reflected both of us. His architectural drawings hanging beside my beloved books, spaces for togetherness and spaces for solitude when needed. On the anniversary of the night we met, he took me back to that same apartment building. The owner was a client of his now, and the place was undergoing renovation. In the empty living room where we had first locked eyes, he caught my wrist once more, placing my hand on his throat as he had done a year before. "I knew then," he said softly, "standing here with your hand on my throat, watching your eyes widen with understanding rather than fear. I knew you were someone special, someone who could understand the language I was speaking without words." "And what language was that?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "The language of trust," he replied, "of surrender and control, of seeing and being seen." His free hand came up to cup my cheek. "The language of love, though I didn't have the courage to call it that yet." I smiled, leaning into his touch. "I'm fluent now," I told him, "in all those languages." "We both are," he agreed, pulling me closer. "And we have a lifetime to become even more eloquent." As we stood there in the empty room where our story had begun, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this point. That single moment, his hand catching my wrist, setting it on his throat, watching my reaction, had changed the course of my life. It had opened a door to self-discovery, to a relationship built on honesty and vulnerability, to a love that embraced all aspects of who we were. Some might not understand what we share. They might see only the surface, the marks sometimes left on skin, the exchange of power, the intensity that burns between us. But they would miss the deeper truth, that in our dynamic, we have found a freedom neither of us experienced before. The freedom to be fully ourselves, to express desires without shame, to trust completely. Our story continues to unfold, day by day. We are writing it together, each chapter revealing new aspects of ourselves and our relationship. There are still moments of uncertainty, times when we must navigate difficult conversations or reconcile different needs. But through it all, we return to that fundamental truth that was established in our very first encounter. We see each other, truly see each other, and in that seeing, we find home. So when people ask me how Alex and I met, I smile and tell them, he caught my wrist mid-step, set it on his throat, and watched me. Their reactions vary: confusion, curiosity, occasionally discomfort. But I no longer feel the need to explain or justify. Our beginning was unconventional, just as our love remains unconventional by some standards. But it is ours, authentic and true, and that is all that matters. In the end, isn't that what we all seek? Not just to be loved, but to be seen. To find someone who recognizes the parts of ourselves we keep hidden and says, "Yes, this too. I accept this too." Alex gave me that gift that night at the party, and I return it to him every day. It is an ongoing exchange, this seeing and being seen, this delicate dance of vulnerability and strength. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Total _char_count, 18,906.